All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is 7 o'clock, and I'd like to resume the regular meeting of council for Monday, April the 14th. Looking for a motion to approve our agenda this evening.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Tonight we have a full house, so quick, somebody slam the doors and we'll keep you all here. Good to see, but we're here for something special this evening, and I would just like to say welcome to the students of Dunsmuir and some of you that have moved on to Belmont. This started a number of years back with the goal of raising money for cancer. So I'll just read, if you will. The Grade 9 Leadership Program at Dunsmuir Middle School, led by teachers Brian Hobson and Chris Johnson, has come to known as the Give It Back program. Their focus is on finding ways to get the entire school community involved in events that raise awareness and funds for important causes. In 2012, Dunsmuir student Jamie Hamilton, no relation, was the inspiration for her teachers and peers to pay it forward to the BC Children's Cancer Parents Association. The grade 9 student has overcome 3 bouts of leukemia, one when she was 5, the second when she was 9, and again when she was 12. I've had the pleasure of meeting young Jamie. She's been friends with kids in our neighborhood, so it's been an interesting ride for their family for sure. She has been in remission since August of 2012 after receiving a bone marrow transplant at BC Children's Hospital in Vancouver. Jamie knows firsthand how difficult and exhausting and expensive it can be for young patients and their families to travel back and forth to Vancouver for appointments, chemotherapy, and other treatments. To help other families who face similar challenges, students in the Dunsmuir's Leadership Program took the initiative to raise $10,000 through a fun fair carnival, silent auction, t-shirt campaign. The t-shirts featured the slogan, "Fight," in a creative design done by Ray Yasaki, who was a grade 9 student in the leadership program at that time. Profits from the sale of the t-shirts added to the total money raised, which will go directly to help families on Vancouver Island. Brian Hobson has seen the incredible positive impact for these young students can have when they unite towards a single cause. In the very first year, the leadership group raised $17,000 for Connect Place, and we've kept the momentum going ever since. We have current leadership students as well as other students from the school, staff, parents, and even the past leadership students who have gone on to high school and university who come back and get involved. I'd like to take this time to welcome those students that are here representing Dunsmuir and Belmont. Teachers, Brian Hobson and Chris, if you could come forward. I'm not sure who's who and whatever in there, but students and everyone, we have a presentation from the City of Colwood and on our Pay It Forward, recognizing your work. Council? Group thing. Yeah, for sure. We do it together. Who's stepping forward? Jamie. This is for your class and everything that you guys have been doing. So, congratulations. Thank you so much, you guys. And on an additional note, for those of you, young Hannah Day, who's a young lady who's also got a fight of her life, has been doing a remarkably improved since her transplant recently. So she's free of all medical devices at this point and is quite a happy little girl. So we got our fingers crossed for her as well. Yeah. Okay, all of you in the back, you can move up if you like, way up. Come on, Ian. Oh, nice. Way to go, guys. Yeah, right. Yeah, you guys are going to be having to bring popcorn the next time you show up. And I should have mentioned to the students as we were going out, too, that they can watch the presentation. We televise through YouTube. It will be uploaded on our meetings, so... Anyways, moving on, public participation. This is the opportunity for members of the public who can step forward and make comment on any of the items that we have before us or just in general. It's not a discussion, it's not a Q&A, but it is an opportunity to state your mind. So if there's anyone within the public gallery that would like to make a comment, now would be your time to step forward. Again, I'm going to ask, name and address, and if you don't want to provide it over the recorded device, you can provide it in writing to our recorder.
Bill Randall, 686 Donovan. I have a few words to say about my rezoning application. Would you appreciate me doing that now?
Now would be the time if they come in.
All right. So good evening. Like I said, my name is Bill Randall, and I'm the applicant for rezoning of my property at 686 Donovan Avenue. I'm asking council to please consider my application positively and allow it to proceed onto a public hearing. After discussion and consideration, the Land Use Committee is happy with my application. Beyond that, as we know, infilling plays a crucial part in the city's goal to grow positively within the standards of its official community plan. New growth means new infrastructure. It also brings much needed revitalization to a neighborhood. It brings land values, and that benefits the city. With this application, I have reduced the amount of lots and increased lot size. Lots will now have a 12-meter width. This change in width now places each home within the parameters allowed for secondary suites under current Colwood guidelines. And that in itself asks another question, and that's parking. Out of the 8 lots on the current application, I'm going to need 1 or 2 for a treated septic system, meaning I will build only about 6 or 7 homes with this application. However, if we were looking to the future, and if all 8 lots were built with suites, I would need 24 spots based on 2 spots per single home dwelling and 1 for a suite for a total of 3. And with 8 homes, that would be 24 spots. The current plan that we have right now provides 44 spots, much more than the standard required. For the most part, not every home is going to maximize its parking allotment. Talking with some civil engineers, it is agreed current on-site parking is more than required. With only 4 or 5 of these homes facing east, traffic flow is not a concern. Consequently, parking is clearly not an issue with this application. Now, this process toward development is in its very early stages, and I have not completed any home designs as of yet. But it is important to realize that builders need options. Builders like to add suites because it increases value and sale potential. It's what most of today's consumers buying a home are looking for. And most municipalities today also realize the benefits to including suites with their growth plans. Encouraging legal suites creates affordable housing, often charging less than a rental building. Suites can provide the added income needed for first-time homeowners to purchase. Legal suites can provide the homeowner with a much-needed financial buffer for security during hard times. Legal suites can provide avenues for proper building code construction, inspection, safety, and liability concerns. Legal suites can provide additional income for senior citizens and other fixed-income homeowners. They can accommodate elderly parents, adult children, or family members offering companionship while preserving their independence and privacy. It also allows the elderly to remain close to their families and within the community. Now, CMHC says secondary suites increase property value and also neighboring values too, which in turn creates a much-needed city tax base. They create a more efficient use of municipal infrastructures like transit, utilities, roads, rec centers, and parks. The increased population or density can enhance the viability of local schools, community centers, shops, local businesses, and services. In short, municipalities are recognizing more and more the positive points on the issue of suites and the good they can provide their community. I approve of suites, but ultimately, I trust in Council's ability and its integrity to do what is right for Colwood and what is fair and reasonable for the applicant. My commitment to Council is that I am open and flexible to work with you on this issue. All I ask is that the issue on suites does not negate the fundamentals of my application. In that, all I am asking is permission to rezone my property. This is a good application. I am not alone in believing it's a good application for Colwood and that it's good for the community. I have a vested interest in here because it's my intention to continue living on the property. I have lived in Colwood a long time, and I don't see that changing. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, there won't be any questions at this time, Mr. Randall. Any other members of the public? For the last time, your chance to come and let us know. Seeing none, then we will move on. Next is Mayor's message. I've got a few things to announce. A lot of them are date related, but I think, Marcy, we've got a lot of this, so it's for benefit of the public that are here and for the record of our webcasting. Transportation Master Plan, there will be a event from 3 to 6 here at Colwood City Hall for the public. It's an open drop-in, Wednesday, April 23rd. Colwood Sewage Treatment and Resource Recovery Proposal. There will be more information and an opportunity for people to come and converse on that on Wednesday, April 30th, 5 till 8 at the Colwood Pentecostal Church on Souk Road. To note as well, the Colwood Spring Cleanup is coming up here on April 25th and 26th. There is a list of accepted materials I would on our website in that regard. Emergency Preparedness Fair, news of devastating mudslides and earthquakes, our wake-up call. Learn the preparedness tips through exciting displays and fun activities. That is being held at the Juan de Fuca Senior Center, inside and out, so it'll be a fairly comprehensive setup. It is Sunday, May the 4th from 11 until 4 p.m. I would also like to take an opportunity to share that we have been in receipt of a certificate of environmental accomplishment. The City of Colwood has participated in the shredding and recycling program and has saved 42.3 trees from destruction in 2013 through our efforts of recycling our paperwork and separating on that one. So we can continue to preserve the green of Colwood. And then there was a message sent out from staff. There was a Big Brothers and Sisters bowling event last Friday a fundraiser, and there was a total of $30,000 made for that event that goes to help the kids in need here in Victoria. That money stays here in Victoria. It's not part of a national organization or whatever. So, and the other one, of course, is the lunar eclipse tonight. For the night owls, we have from 11:30 till 1:30. It's supposed to be fairly spectacular, a red moon, as we do a total eclipse on a full moon. So it might be worth taking a look-see on for those who wake up through the night. And I think that's it as for anything on that one. Looking for adoption of the following set of minutes of the regular meeting of council, March the 24th.
Move adoption.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Looking for receipt on a number of sets of minutes. Heritage Commission, March 10th. Parks, Recreation and Culture, February 17th. Planning and Land Use Committee, March 18th. Protective Services, February 12th. Transportation and Public Infrastructure, March 3rd. Special Transportation and Public Infrastructure, February 25th.
Move receipt.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. I have nothing before me requiring, in correspondence, requiring council direction for this meeting. So moving on to Planning and Land Use Committee, 7.1.1, rezoning application of 686 Donovan. Councillor Lukens?
Thank you. So the applicant is requesting to rezone the property from the current residential R1 zoning designation to small lot designation. At such time as sanitary sewer is available, the applicant is proposing a total of 8 strata lots ranging from 308 meters to 458 meters squared in an area within a cul-de-sac configuration. In 2013, the applicant submitted an application, it was back in November, you may recall, to rezone the same property, proposing to create 9 lots ranging from 308 meters to 400 meters squared in an area in a cul-de-sac configuration as well. But the application was defeated by council at that time. This new application, as you can see, reduces the number of lots from 9 to 8 and increases the lot width from 10 meters to 12 meters, which allows it to fall within the zoning for suites. The director explained that the subdivision must comply with Island Health Authority subdivision standards and that 2 of the lots reserved for a sewage treatment facility will not be buildable until access to sewers is granted, and a form and character development permit would be required. Present zoning would allow 5 single-family lots or 3 duplex lots, all permitting secondary suites. I can share that the intention of the developer is to build on those other lots once sewers are available. So just keep that in mind. The applicant has agreed to contribute to $2,500 per unit in excess of 5 to the Community Amenities Reserve Fund and $500 per unit in excess of 5 to the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. The subject property is designated as neighborhood within the OCP, and that the proposed density of 20 units per hectare is less than the general density target envisioned in the OCP, but the lower proposed density can be offset by higher densities elsewhere. Mr. Haldenby did conclude that staff feel that the density proposed is appropriate and confirmed that there are no charges registered against the title of the property which would affect this application. The owner spoke, 686 Donovan Ave, explaining that the changes were made to the previous application after it was defeated at council and are based on concerns and suggestions expressed during the previous committee and council meetings, noting that he's reduced the number of lots allowed for the increase in lot size and would also permit the inclusion of secondary suites. He confirmed the lots dedicated to the sewage treatment facility could not be developed until sewer is available, as I mentioned. There were both supporters and opponents to the application at the meeting. The engineer was there because there was some questions about the sewers and also improvements to Donovan, and he expressed that there would be no improvements to Donovan unless funding was allocated by council. There was a recommendation actually, there was a comment made from committee. It was suggested that any discussion or decision surrounding the inclusion of secondary suites would more than likely continue at the council level. There was quite a back and forth debate about whether or not suites should be allowed or not, but we need to remember this is the rezoning stage of it. But it was going on for some time, so we just put a stop to it and said let council decide whether or not that's where they want to go or not. So there was no recommendation on that. As you can see, there are 2 recommendations. The first one should not have been included in there. That's an error, so we'll go to the second one. The one moved by Ron Coutre, that it be recommended to council that council deem the current application to be a new application, in which case the time limit would not apply and the application can proceed. There was 2 requests, if you saw the report, with respect to waiving the fees, and potentially the timeline was being impacted because they're supposed to wait a certain amount of time. B, that council require that all application fees be paid for the current application, which I just spoke of. C, that council consider limiting the number of secondary suites for the total development. D, that a zoning amendment bylaw, including provisions for required contributions to the Community Amenity Fund in the amount of $2,500 per dwelling unit in excess of 5, and a contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund in the amount of $500 per dwelling unit in excess of 5, be prepared that such, if, when provisions are made in a registrable development agreement for the following conditions, consideration will be given to the adoption of the amendment bylaw. And I am not going to list off all of those. You can see those. And I'll leave it at that.
Making that recommendation?
Yes, I made the recommendation. Thank you.
Second conversation, discussion, Councillor Day.
Thank you. There was a paragraph in the report that went to planning and land use. It's on page 6 of the 15-page report. And in it, it says, to avoid property potentially sitting bare for a long period of time, council may wish to secure through the development agreement that site clearing or demolition may only commence once a building permit or development permit has been issued. And I'm just wondering if that was addressed.
It was not discussed, but Alan may have further comment, but we did not discuss that.
Through the chair, that would have to be added in.
So I would like to move that amendment that council request, that through the development agreement, site clearing or demolition may only commence once a building permit or development permit has been issued.
Need a seconder on that?
Second.
Conversation, discussion on that addition.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Holdenby, just for clarification, with that going forward, I realise that the intention is to build some of the homes initially, but there's also need for space for a septic field. I'm certainly in favour of what Councillor Day is talking about. I'm just trying to make sure that that's actually a practical recommendation.
The proposal from the applicant is that either 1 or 2 of the lots, depending on how much space is necessary, would be allocated for the treatment plant in the interim to sewer being made available.
Okay. So we can do that kind of protection as we build approach.
I'm not quite sure what protection you're referring to.
I guess councillors...
Oh, I see,
yeah.
okay. Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you. Just...
I believe a permit is issued in the case of the septic field, so I think that would cover the development agreement or building permit portion.
Anyone else? Call the question then on the amendment then to the motion. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. Any further conversation on the main motion?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to add as well, one of the discussions that did happen at the committee table that I don't see included in here was a request for some green space for children or whatever on site. And the applicant has identified that right across from where the potential septic or sewer would be, could be green space built up into a little playground, etc. and it could be accommodated there.
How would that fare in time when those lots might come under development? Then?
Yeah, and I did have I did ask the question as well, and he would ensure that that green space was available at that time, at all times. So, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Martin, your hand was in the air.
Yeah, thank you. The motion itself is a little vague, so it's something that we need to address, and it's just number C, that council consider limiting the number of secondary suites. So I think that motion can't sit the way it reads right now, because we either need to make a decision tonight on if we're going to be limiting the number of secondary suites to that. So I want to make sure that we don't move forward, and we'll probably need to amend that.
Councillor Lukens, you made mention of 16 suites in total?
No, there's only going to be 7 or 8 houses built. So there potentially could be 8 suites, which would make 16 residences, right?
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. Just wanted to make sure that it wasn't like super
Councillor Sullivan has.
Yeah. Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that although each unit is eligible to put a suite in, I'm actually comforted by the fact that there is ample, way more parking, that'll be in this development than what is expected. So concerns with respect to increased density and parking on street and child safety issues, I think, have been addressed, and I just wanted to point that out. I think the developer has gone beyond what is required of him.
Others? Councillor Cullington?
Thank you. Again, through you to Mr. Holdenby. So with the lots, we have to have a 12-metre frontage to have suites. When I look at the plan that was in front of Planning and Land Use Committee, it looks like there are a couple of lots that have a frontage that's less than 12 metres. So are all 8 eligible for suites?
Through the chair, only those that are at least 12 meters in width.
Okay. So if I'm reading this correctly, not all, if the configuration is as shown, not all of those 8 would be eligible for suites?
That's correct.
Okay. So actually it would be less than a total number of 16. Okay. That's good. I will be supporting this application, and I am supportive of secondary suites where possible. I think they are, we brought them in because they provide affordable housing both for people who rent the suites and for people who buy the homes, and then it helps them to pay the mortgage. I wasn't able to attend the Planning and Land Use meeting, but I gather there was quite a bit of discussion on traffic. I had some fun playing with numbers, and I said, well, okay, if there are 16 units and they all have 2 cars and they all leave within a 1-hour period, it's 1 car every 2 minutes. So I do bike down Donovan. I'm familiar with that area, and if I see a car coming, I'm surprised. I always have to kind of remember to get out of the way because I'm used to barreling down the middle of the road. So it's not on the correct side of the road. So I think it is nice to see development happening in that area, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Sullivan?
I think that given that there's some ambiguity with respect to item number C that Councillor Martin pointed out, I'd like to move an amendment in that we strike number C completely from the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Comments, questions? I'm just wondering, by striking it, does it fall then back to our standard policy of only those that are within the 12? And then, okay, I'm happy with that. Nobody else call the question then on that amendment of striking C? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. So then we have a revised main motion without C.
Yep.
Any further conversation? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion opposed? Councillor Day? Motion has been carried. Moving to 7.2, Transportation Public Infrastructure, Capital Projects Update, coming from Councillor Cullington. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So at Transportation Public Infrastructure Committee, we had an update on all of the various projects going on, and you get the idea from the chart with all the little numbers and information that it was quite detailed. I do not propose to do all of that. But it does show how we're going to, we have a number of projects on the go, and the idea is to sort of show how we're going to achieve them all this year. There were a number that we paid particular attention to. Hopefully everybody has seen the work that's being done at Wishart and Cairndale, now looking pretty nice, and hopefully signal activation happening by the end of the month. One of the next pieces then is to do the sidewalk between Cairndale and Wishart School. The plan is to do that work when school is out for the summer. Makes sense, you don't have as many children walking through that area, although obviously there is still the playground, and we do have to pay attention to that. So that's scheduled to start the week of June 30th. A couple of projects that we have on our books that staff recommended that we defer for different reasons. So one is at the Wilfett and Whale intersection, which is also where the Galloping Goose goes across. There had been talk of doing upgrades in particular to make it easier for bikes to go across. That is still something that the city wants to do, but with the work going on in the hotel at the moment, it's probably best to wait until that work is finished before moving that forward. That also gives us an opportunity to have a conversation with the CRD about, hey, it's the Galloping Goose, how would you like to help us fund some of this work? So that's something that the suggestion is to push that off for a year or so. The other place that staff suggested that we might want to move this off, there is on the books doing a bike lane and parking area on Ocean Boulevard. That is right next to the Park and Ride, which of course is where we're also looking at putting the Colwood Resource Recovery Centre, aka sewage treatment facility. And again, it makes sense to kind of have a strong sense of what we want to do in that area before we actually move forward with those improvements. What that would do is give us a little bit of additional money that we could put into the Souk and Kelly Road area, which is a project where we've been sort of borrowing money from, if you like, for various other valuable projects. But if we move the money from those two projects back into Souk and Kelly Road, it would allow us to move forward with something substantial. So there's so those two sources of funding would bring us up to a funding total of $710,000 for the Souk and Kelly Road project, exclusive of any grants that we may be lucky enough to get. So what committee is recommending is that we adjust the 2014 budget to reassign $350,000 in gas tax funding from the Wilfett and Whale traffic signal to that Kelly and Souk project, and also amend it to reassign $35,000. It says gas tax funding here. That actually should read sidewalk fund, because that's actually where that particular funding was coming from. So $35,000 from the sidewalk fund from the Ocean Boulevard bike lanes parking stalls project to the Kelly and Souk Road project. We did get good news that the gas tax has been extended to 2018. That means we will be getting money for future years. We don't want to change any timelines. We still want to keep moving forward with those projects that we see as important. So it was recommended by committee, and I so move that the 2014 be amended to reassign $350,000 in gas tax funding from the Wilfett and Whale traffic signal to the Kelly and Souk project, and that the 2014 budget be amended to reassign $35,000 in sidewalk funding from the Ocean Boulevard bike lanes parking stalls to the Kelly Souk project.
Second.
Conversation, discussion. Councillor Day?
Thank you. I'm a little bit concerned with making recommendations to the Kelly Soup project, only because we don't have any idea really what we're contemplating doing there. I'm concerned with taking the Wilford Wheel traffic signal out of the kitty at this point in time. I guess we are going to get more gas tax revenue now that the agreement has been extended to 2018. But that is a very important and much needed signal crossing. And I'm feeling just a tiny bit uncomfortable with approving where the budget monies are without knowing what the project is.
Madam Mayor, if I may respond? Thank you. There's a bit of a chicken and egg that goes on. We've asked staff to bring us that design, I think, Michael, to the next TPI meeting. Staff need to know sort of what kind of money is available so that they can design appropriately. That's sort of part of that equation. I guess on the other part, I would certainly concur that it's an important project, but I would like to see us go after CRD for some of that funding, I'm comforted knowing that we will be getting more gas tax down the road.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. So I love capital projects, so I'm not going to complain about us doing something that's awesome. But my question is, from a design standpoint and everything else, and I guess I'm looking to both Michael and to finance, if we allocate this $350,000 from the gas tax to this, and I understand that it's been extended, the gas tax program, but is this specific gas tax dollar having to be spent by March of 2015?
That was something I learned relatively recently, actually, that they have, in fact, extended the deadline for spending this to, I believe it's 2018.
2019. Okay, so it's not, so we're allocating it, but the money doesn't have to be spent by that deadline that we were working from last time.
Only from the point of view that we'd like to get it built.
Yeah.
And onto the next year's money next year.
And my second question is, it looks to me like the budget roughly we're projecting to be about 710,000, or we're not, or am I misreading that just because I was reading it off the minutes?
That's the money that's available, and it's one of those projects that you just go far enough down the road to spend the money.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councillor Lukens.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question through yourself to engineering. I would just like to inquire, it's April, and I'm just wondering where we're at with the sewage treatment at Matilda, because I don't see it identified as a project, and I'm just wondering if it's going to be on the next list.
Well, my understanding is that the owners of the property around the cul-de-sac cannot all agree, and they have asked me to intervene, if you like, to try and provide assurances that can be provided to one of the owners.
Cannot agree on what, may I ask?
Well, the people around the cul-de-sac have to agree on giving $50,000 to the city, and I gather that I don't know what the split of that $50,000 is, but all the owners are involved in some way.
Okay, because I understood that was in place. I do know that they're now having to start to spend some money on that, so that's why I'm bringing it forward. So maybe we can follow up with the contact just to find out what's going on, because I think we allocated those monies in the budget this year, but I'm not seeing it, and I know that build-out will take some time. So thank you.
Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I need to recognize that the excellent report that staff brought forward on this particular subject, which outlines some very specific deliverables, which committee will be following closely, and it's exciting to see some end dates and some project dates clearly stated. I'm supportive of moving the $350,000 in gas tax funding. I did mention that I didn't want it to go towards a slush fund, so to speak, to be drained, for other projects, and I was given the assurance that that wouldn't be the case. And the reason why I think it's important that we look at that corridor is just that we know it's already a challenge, and it's in need of some love, quite frankly, and we know what's coming down the pipe a kilometer down the road in Langford. And we know that that corridor is going to get even busier. And so I think by starting these improvements, it will be a proactive step in trying to deal with something that's going to occur in the not too distant future. So I'm very supportive, and I understand that this is going to be a phased approach as well as funding is forthcoming. And I also understand that the deputy director is working on a proposal or a design. And this certainly will give him a good starting point in which to start off. And so I commend the engineering department for bringing this forward. And I'm sure that we will have the same discussions regarding the light once the hotel and the other developments have taken place around the Wilfort and Whale Road intersection. Thanks.
And on that Whale Road and Wilfort intersection, it makes, I see the benefit in leaving it for now, because if we can ever get an access road put through onto Goldstream through that property there, would be benefit to aligning the road grid in that area and access. So best we not be digging up and putting in lines and then digging them all back up again. So any other comments, questions? Call the question, then all those in favor? Oh, Councillor Day. Sorry.
That's all right. Sorry, I just remembered one thing about the Souk Kelly area, and that is to ensure that the design, when it is brought in, is transit friendly in both directions. Even though there is insufficient transit on that corridor now, due to them having diverted some of the buses onto Veterans Memorial Parkway, where I would point out there are no homes to be serviced. If we build the road so that transit finds it easy to use the road, I guess we'll have a better chance of getting more transit on it.
And we're including curb cuts, right, Councillor Day? No, I mean, it was a brutal experience being on the bus here not that long ago, and it was one of our rear-loading wheelchair access community buses, and we picked up a individual at the Goldstream intersection. So it was a full stop and hold up of traffic while they opened that rear door, accessed the individual onto the bus, who then got off by the Shell station there by Mount View, and which the bus driver had to put herself at risk to stand out and block traffic bodily so this wheelchair could run the roadway around the bus, get up in front, and then go. We had to wait for them to get to the corner, to get onto the sidewalk, to turn and come back the other direction, because there's no curb cuts, no drop downs on that road for wheelchairs to access. So it's a consideration that needs to be done for sure. Any other comments, questions? Call the question then on our recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Again, under Transportation and Public Infrastructure, Memorandum of Extension for Royal Roads and Horizon Technologies.
Can I ask Michael to introduce this, and then I'll move the recommendation?
So the contract with NRCan has been extended as agreed to by Council and as finally agreed to by NRCan. and the amounts required in that Solar Colwood budget are all in the current budget approved by council. And all that is needed now is to extend the MOUs or the partner agreements to match the new term of the main agreement, and this is all done in accordance with the budget. So that's why these MOUs are brought before you, and there will be a further MOU with Sioux Nation that will come to council later once those details have been sorted out. Thank you.
Councillor Cullington?
So there are two draft partner agreements attached, one for Royal Roads University and one for Horizon Technologies. They were checked with the individuals involved in both organisations, and they're good with the language that's in there. And as Michael said, it's consistent with what we've already approved as council in the agreement with NRCan. So there's no financial implications out of this. It's just sort of simply formalising the various pieces of money that need to go to different places. So I would move that council approve and authorise the mayor and CAO to sign the extension of the Solar Colwood Partnership Agreement with Royal Roads University with a new term to expire March 31st, 2015, and that council approve and authorise the mayor and chief administrative officer to sign the extension of the Solar Colwood Partner Agreement with Horizon Technologies with a new term to expire March 31st, 2015.
Second. Questions and comments from council? I have one, and with CRD taking this over, do they take over the funding and all the whatever there as well? That still stays within that Solar Colwood program, so they're just being another point of contact or referencing or whatever?
The
so that we
partner agreements that we have with these two organisations, so the partner agreement we have with Horizon Technologies deals with the whole smart home system, so that's something that's only within, in terms of the funding, is only within Colwood, although I think we are starting to see one or two systems installed in a good way outside of Colwood as well. So that is simply an agreement between Colwood and Horizon, and similarly Colwood holds the contract, if you will, with Royal Roads University because they're doing the monitoring of the entire project. So it's really only the solar hot water grants piece that got moved out to the CRD. So yes, it's appropriate that we hang on to these bits.
Good. And the dates are correct in there, like we're going back to 2011. If
Yep.
this is an extension, we're just adding the end date.
So we're adding language to existing agreements.
Yeah. It would have been beneficial to see those in red or some other add-on, so it doesn't. Anybody else? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Moving then forward into protective services, 7.3.1, replacement of Snorkel 57, vehicle tendering and purchase process. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Your Worship. At our last Protective Services Committee, the Fire Chief gave committee an overview of his report regarding the replacement of the fire apparatus known as Snorkel 57. That the replacement has been the subject of much discussion at previous Council and Protective Services Committees, as well as Budget and Committee of the Whole meetings. The Chief explained that the purpose of the report is to obtain approval to proceed to tender for the replacement of this piece of apparatus, and that further reports will be presented to committee as each step in the process is accomplished. All costs, part of the process is to go to an alternative approval process, and funding for all costs has been provided for in the 2014 operating budget. The Chief also spoke about the most recent OCP review that was completed by, or that is being completed by the Planning Department, which shows that the population in Colwood will in fact double by 2028. And construction of the new development will actually coincide with the first half of the lifespan of the new piece of apparatus to be purchased, and through this tender, adding that the building out phase of any development is the most vulnerable time for a fire to take place. It's also noted that the current piece of apparatus no longer is rated. It's 30 plus years old. The reason why it's still running as well as it is because we have a crew up at the fire station that maintains it meticulously. But it is starting to show its age, and because of the time frame that it takes to actually replace this piece of apparatus, it's important that we give approval now. A couple of points regarding the motion. One, it's only the first of many recommendations and reports that will be coming to council, and this is simply giving the direction to the chief to go out and tender it to get some costs. And once that process is done, then we'll have a better idea in terms of what the hard costs will be for the apparatus, and work will continue to take place with the Director of Finance to provide funding in the 2015 budget. To that end, the committee recommended, and I so move, that the fire chief be directed to proceed with the tendering and purchasing of a replacement Snorkel 5.7 for delivery in late 2015, and that the public be consulted on the funding of the replacement apparatus via the alternative approval process as required by the community charter to ensure the ability to renew the lease for an additional 5-year term. And finally, that the fire chief, in consultation with the Director of Finance, place appropriate funding in the fire department operating budget commencing in 2015 to cover payments to lease the vehicle for a 5-year term with an optional 5-year renewal.
Second.
Councillor Martin?
Thank you. I have two questions. First is, I asked Councillor Cullington, and I think she's right, but I just wanted to confirm it. The alternative approval process is what?
I don't think I could do justice in describing it, so I will defer to the Director of Administration or to the Director of Finance.
Am I on? The alternative approval process is required anytime that you have incurred debt longer than 10 years. And because it's going to take, or longer than 5 years, sorry, and because it's going to take 10 years for us to purchase this piece of apparatus outright, we have to go through what's called an alternative approval process, which is basically similar to like a public notice, just to let our citizens know that we are incurring debt, but it's not as extreme or restricted as it would be, say, long-term debt that we would need to go through CRD.
Okay. Thank you. My second question is, are we anticipating that this truck is going to fit the fire station? Or is this
Yep.
the one that we need to modify the fire station so that it fits?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and you're right, Council did provide funding for modification of the apparatus bay to accommodate a new vehicle that was anticipated.
So we are anticipating that it's going
Yes.
to? Through the chair?
Yes.
And is there any way during the tendering process that we think that we might be able to get away with not having to modify the building? Or is that impossible now?
Yeah,
The way the trucks are?
Yeah, there was a significant amount of research done in anticipation of this report, and it was not felt, unfortunately, as hard as they did try to buy a piece of apparatus that would fit within the current configuration.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question.
Councillor Lukens?
We have a mutual aid agreement with View Royal. They're building a new fire hall. They could just build one big enough to house it. That may not be appeal to our current firefighters, but...
Pat?
I would just like to add an explanation to the Director of Finance's explanation about the alternate approval process. The notification that you send out to the public is advising them that unless 10% of them or more petition against council proceeding with the purchase, then we'll proceed with the purchase. So if we have more than 10% of our community coming forward saying, we don't agree with you doing it, then we can't just go ahead and do it.
Councillor Day?
Thank you. The recommendation, the first part speaks to proceeding with the tendering and purchasing. The second and third parts refer to renewing a lease and making lease payments. So I just would like to know, are we tendering and purchasing, or are we leasing?
That's an excellent question, Your Worship. It's my understanding that after 10 years after the lease, then the city would own the truck outright. So it's similar to the process that we used for the new pumper and the other vehicles. So we kind of lease to own 5 years, and then we renew it after another 5-year term. At 10 years, it's done. So we get half the life of the apparatus paid for. So it's kind of both lease and then a purchase.
I would assume there's a significant benefit to doing it that way. I'm just not clear on that.
Yeah, I think ideally there was always, through you, Your Worship, ideally it would be nice to be able to purchase that piece of apparatus or any fire apparatus outright. But the city has never been in the position to be able to do that, unfortunately. But with the work that the Director of Finance has done, hopefully in another 20, 30 years, we'll be able to have
It's 2032 when we finally have a reserve for the fire department apparatus.
Excellent.
Councillor Cullington.
Can't go for a long time yet, Gordie. Again, I'm just checking on the wording of the motion. So the first part says, I think we want the first part to say tendering so that we know the cost. Then we want to consult the public. Then we want to make sure it's in our budget. And then we want to purchase it. Is that not correct?
I'm getting a no from our director.
No, we definitely have to make the commitment to purchase it, or the company that will be building it over the next 14 months will not build it for us. So we have to actually enter into a purchase agreement. How we finance it is a different issue. How we finance it in this case is going to be a lease, but we are purchasing.
I guess I'm just trying to understand what happens if we tender it comes out at this extraordinary number, the public come through with a counter petition and we find we can't fund it through the budget. I'm just, there's a kind of a sequencing thing that I'm missing.
Yeah, well, they have to put out a tender to purchase the apparatus. And once that has happened where they have a dollar value, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
They need to put a tender out so they know how much it's going to cost. And then once they know how much it's going to cost, then they do the public alternative approval process. And then we actually buy it at the very end, if nobody says you cannot do it.
Thank you. It was just the sequencing piece.
Okay, all right. So rather, Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Our CAO maybe reminded me about this too, so I'm just going to ask this because I think it's important that we all know this, is just what is our long-term borrowing ability when it comes to capital projects such as this, and where do we sit?
We actually have enough debt ceiling right now to incur about $30 million worth of debt.
Oh, great. Let's go shopping.
Yeah. We could build all of Kelly.
No.
Through the chair to the director of finance, I guess I'm somewhat comfortable with this process. My only concern is the lack of available information showing the benefits over leasing over purchasing. Although we are ultimately going to purchase after a lease, what are the other avenues? And are there other municipalities within the province that may be building this similar apparatus in the next several years that maybe we can take advantage of bulk purchasing and possibly save an additional 10%?
That's a great person.
And I'm hearing, though, like I'm with that, like wanting to get the best deal out of it. And I know, from past practices, our fire department in the past has been very critical and very determined to get the best deal in anything that they've done. So I'm pretty sure that our chief and the men that are there and women that are part of this whole thing will ensure, I think, that we get the same kind of attention to that detail. It sounds to me like we don't have that $1 million plus potential, cash in hand at this point. So the leasing part of it will be, but we need to know the number before we can figure out what it's going to look like. So kind of caught between, we need to find out what that number is going to be, and then go from there. And it still has a process. It's not a said and done deal. There's still a process involved. So, Councillor Sullivan, and then Day.
Thank you, through the chair. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that once it goes out for tender, then this item will come back to council for deliberation. Okay, so if that's the process, then might I request that at that time we have a much better understanding, or on or before that time, we have a much better understanding of the comparisons between our different options for purchase, i.e. lease versus outright purchase versus bulk purchasing with another, I don't know, municipality, if that's an option, I don't know. But I think it's important that we actually understand around this table what the benefits to the city are of the lease option that's being presented right now.
Well, we do have a representative sitting here. I'm sure we'll be right back to the department sending out those. Who else is looking to buy a Snorkel? Councillor Martin, did you have something?
Okay, sure, I'll ask it publicly. Thank you. The question I had, and I was directing it through our Director of Finance, was, and the point I think our CAO was making was, do we know, have we calculated out, for example, the interest on a lease is normally higher than if we borrow money, say, from MFA? And have we looked at that since we have $30 million? I mean, it's a political decision from a council standpoint of, do we want to tie up $1 million of that or whatever the dollar amount ends up being, but we might save money from an interest standpoint. So have we looked at that?
I've talked to the fire chief about this particular purchase for quite some time. He's got everything very well researched, and if the only option that we really have at this point is the leasing, because trying to think what the fire chief said to me about that. A loan instrument would be a higher interest cost to the city, I believe, is how it turned out. And the fire department has quite successfully used this leasing arrangement over the years to try to keep their apparatus current.
Thank you.
Councillor Day.
Sorry, the CEO had his hand up as well. I was just going to point out that fire equipment may be a little bit different in that having to meet the firefighter underwriters issues, and that age, we can pretty much say with a surety that they're going to last X number of years, and then no matter how good we keep them or how little we use them, they're not going to be insurable apparatus for us. But there have been, over the years, numerous discussions on the benefits of leasing versus owning vehicles here in the city. We've been back and forth. It's very confusing. I can't remember them all, but there are a number of reports that have been written in the past. So I think for the benefit of our comfort around this table, I would really prefer to have the information that the Director of Finance is referring to, having had discussions about, made public in a report format, so that I could thoroughly understand the various factors that are being weighed in this decision, rather than currently, not that I don't trust people here, I do, that's great, but I'd like to be able to trust in the facts rather than just trusting in stuff.
Pat, Jane?
I just wanted to mention through you, Madam Mayor, the Director of Finance can correct me if I'm wrong, but just to assure you that passing the recommendation as put forward isn't the end of the process. The alternate approval process has to include the exact amount of the money that you're talking about borrowing, so that's all part of our advertising and notification to the public. Reporting the outcome of that alternate approval process has to go through a process as well, and a borrowing bylaw has to be adopted by the council with the exact amount of the money to borrow for the truck. So there's a number of steps that are required before we'd be able to just go off and make the purchase.
So we have a motion before us. Any other comments, questions around the table?
I think we should add that Councillor Logan must do 4.5 more terms in order to get to 2032, so he can buy his fire truck.
Anything further? I'll call the question on the motion that we have before us. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Yeah. There was no seconder. Moving on to 7.3.2, Rock the Shores.
Thank you, Worship. The RCMP inspector gave the committee a brief overview of the discussions that have been held with the planning team for this year's Rock the Shores event in Colwood. And if you haven't heard already, this exciting event is actually going to be 3 days in our humble township, and up from 2. The inspector added that policing costs will be increased as a result of the extra day, and that the RCMP will be reorganizing resources to accommodate the policing needs for the event. And we had some significant discussion at the Protective Services. And as the event has grown over the last few years, traditionally the main departments that have been involved in the planning have been police, fire, municipal enforcement, and some engineering. But it was felt by committee and the staff that were there that it should, every single department within the city, from planning to administration to engineering to everybody, including ambulance, should be involved in the planning of this event, because it's becoming so massive and it touches absolutely everybody. And it's important for every department to get on board and support each other in making sure that this thing occurs and it goes off without a hitch, which it has been in the past. It's been a lot of work, but I think at the end of the day it's been worthwhile. So there were a couple of motions that came out of it. The first one was and I will so move that the Chief Administrative Officer be directed to facilitate meetings with all city directors, the RCMP inspector, and the local unit chief of the BC Ambulance Service as required to guarantee successful planning and placement of resources needed to ensure public safety and the successful execution of the Rock the Shores event in Colwood.
Second. Discussion? Councillor Martin?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Logan, how does this fit in with West Shore Park and Rec and the organization there, the organizating? It's a good word. The organizating that they're doing, and I'm just wondering, should we be, they do this as well, right? Mm-hmm. They coordinate. So, are you looking at this to be outside of what West Shore Park and Rec is doing? Or are you hoping that West Shore Park and Rec is engaging this group more as a unit? Or and the reason I bring it up is I just don't want there to be too many meetings. I don't want West Shore Park and Rec organizing the ambulance and the fire department and everything, and then we're organizing a different.
Well, and I guess that's part of the question, right? Certainly, I think everybody should be at the table, and that and we've been operating within these little silos in the past. So the objective that the committee had was to bring all those silos together, so everybody knew, and perhaps West Shore Parks and Rec should have been included in this, and that's something that that I think committee would be open to. It wasn't a limited list for sure, but it was get everybody in the same room, so we are coordinating our plans together, and everybody's on the same page. And there's just this general feeling in the past. last year anyways, that wasn't necessarily the case. And now that the event has stepped up in time and in stature, recognition, it's time that we have a more formal, inclusive process that includes all departments, including West Shore Parks and Rec. That's a good question. So I would envision that they be included in this list as well.
Right. May I answer you? I guess West Shore Park and Rec is the lead in this, right? They're the people who that it's being done on, the land wise. West Shore Park and Rec is the one that is negotiating with Atomic Productions. West Shore Park and Rec, liquor license, all those type of things, all fall under them. I really believe that I think this has very good intentions, this recommendation. I would have a tendency to perhaps want to keep West Shore Park and Rec as the lead and send as a recommendation from this council saying we expect that you engage this group more and that there's a formalized process that you're having all these individuals attend X amount of meetings or something, rather than us trying to take on the lead, because I don't know if it is our role as Colwood to be taking on this lead. I understand it's within our jurisdiction, but it's a different type of thing. It's just my sort of gut feeling.
Councillor Lukens.
Actually, Councillor Day was
Day ahead. Okay.
You can go first.
Okay, thank you. Having sat at the meeting, if I can say, that wasn't the expectation that the CAO and the city become the lead on this. What the expectation was that there was engagement and communication throughout the city departments, including Public Works, including admin, including planning, everybody being on board and supporting those that are actually physically out there throughout the event. So I truly see West Shore as being the lead. I don't anticipate that, personally, I don't see that's what this recommendation is. My expectation would be that West Shore is engaging our CAO. We do know that the RCMP are having direct conversations with Atomic. We do know that Bylaw is also working with Atomic through these types of things. So those conversations are happening. All we're asking is, because it's stepping up to a third day, is that they become much more coordinated and aligned, and everybody knows what the left hand is doing and the right hand at the same time. So it was just about pulling it together and breaking down the silos. That's all this was. It wasn't about us taking a lead and starting our own meetings and having whatever. West Shore can take it. It was about bringing the city together as opposed to being out here when that event's going on. That's what this was about.
Yeah, well said.
Councillor Day.
I certainly support the city taking a more active role in ensuring that that all of our departments are involved. I think Atomic did a great job last year. They contracted Bylaw and RCMP, and they managed the site extremely well. They had a great plan in terms of dealing with their traffic. You know, they have the wonderful VIP entrances and the valet bike parking and all of those things going on. But we could certainly know more about what's happening in terms of, you know, from the Parks, Recreation and Culture Committee's point of view. We would like to be able to be on board with the project and know exactly what's coming up and what's going on through some sort of reporting out process without trying to make that arduous. I'm not looking to make reports for people to have to write, but it's just about being inclusive.
Anyone else? Pat?
I would just like to speak a little bit from the Bylaw Enforcement Division side of things. When we're talking about the involvement of the city as well, Councillor Lukens is correct. The intent is never for Colwood to take anything over. This is West Shore's event. One of the challenges that we had, though, last year, and it's already starting this year, is making sure that we're being recognized as a stakeholder, an interested party. So the host municipality and the local police have to accept the plans that are being put into place, the traffic plans, the policing plans, all those types of things. There was a little bit of an issue to do with traffic and parking last year, and we're trying to make sure that doesn't happen this year. So the first step is, if all of our directors and our staff are aware of what is going on, If we communicate with one another, we can identify our own needs and the things that are extremely important to the city that then get communicated to the West Shore and the event holder to let them know that this is the requirement of the city, one of the interested stakeholders. So I know they've had some meetings that the city hasn't even been invited to yet, and we should be attending all of those meetings. So that's from the bylaws perspective.
And I don't disagree that they shouldn't be part of the planning team there, but to, like, as long as we're not trying to lead it, because, we asked West Shore Parks and Rec to, start thinking outside the box and attracting events and opportunities that will, bring financial funding to them to offset against what the communities have to put in on an annual basis. So this is phenomenal. It's only going to go bigger. We've seen this is the third year, and each day it's grown, or each year it's grown. There is a fairly strong rumor of an upcoming second event for the West Shore by the same production company, and could even be as early as this fall if this 3-day one goes off. So it's important that we, know those things. We need to be part of that conversation, because if there are costs incurred by the city in that hosting, that we have that information to them in advance so that they, can work with it. Because Nick's been very good to cover off on costs, as I understand it, with bylaw and policing, and that's part of the contract that they have to provide to. So, Councillor Lucan's actually ahead of you, if you don't mind.
You looked at me. Cool.
I know. I just want to add to that, Mayor, and that is, the inspector spoke of it at the meeting, and as did bylaw. Last year, it was difficult for bylaw to recover the costs. They tried to negotiate them after the fact. So these are the things that we need to make sure are discussed, and we're part of the discussion up front. Sorry?
It was part of the agreement up front. After the fact, they tried to renege on how much they had to
I know,
pay.
that's what I said, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so they had the agreement, but after the fact, they tried to renegotiate it and break it down. The other thing is the RCMP this year have indicated that they're going to have to pull from outside of the region. They're going to have to pull from Whistler. They're going to have to pull from whatever. And so those are all the things, the costs and stuff that they need to make sure are in place early on, because those costs are going to add up. So there's housing and, or lodging and food and all those sorts of things that weren't costs last year, adding this third day, because they don't have the capacity, and they want to be able to make sure that they can utilize, the people properly. The other concern is with respect to ensuring, and this speaks more to item number 2, but the traffic plan. You may remember the first year we had lightning and thunderstorms, and had everybody done a mass exodus, it would have been a nightmare, because there was really nothing planned. And that is one of the biggest concerns, that if there was a mass exodus for any reason, what is the plan and who's taking the lead? Who's managing traffic? Who's doing? And that has not been scheduled. And so that's one of the key things that the RCMP wants to get nailed down, because they don't have the resources to have their men standing out, doing traffic when they could be, doing other things, sort of thing. So anyways, it's just about getting, the West Shore Parks and Rec leading it, absolutely, but the city's at the table, we've got all the players at the table, and everybody's in from the beginning, so everybody knows what everybody else is doing. That's what all this was.
Correct.
Your turn.
I disagree a little bit with Councillor Lucan's statement there, because West Shore Park and Rec does spend a fair amount of time worrying about how to get people in, how to get people out. What do we do, mass exit? I know the RCMP wasn't completely content with it, but there were definitely things that we dealt with there. I agree, there's a real issue. I'm going to support the motion because I think it's good. I get where we're coming from. I think what's important to recognize, though, is that West Shore Park and Rec is in an interesting position, because we are in Colwood, but a lot of times if we talk to one municipality, the other municipalities get their nose all bent out of shape, that why aren't you including me, why aren't you including me? And so West Shore Park and Rec has a tendency to step back and go, okay, we're just going to take it and we're going to try and deal with it. So I would ask that you please be understanding that, that we have some political sensitivities there. The other thing that I do want to make sure, the promoters make money on this, no doubt about it. But so does West Shore Park and Rec, and this is such a great event with us. I also don't want us to start falling into the trap of going that we can start charging for everything, because at some point the promoter will throw up their hands and say this isn't worth it. The energy and stuff. So we have to have a very middle ground with this and not be too demanding on things as well. And I think West Shore Park and Rec has the most. Councillor Day brought it up, and it made me think of this. We absolutely need to have the city engaged more with West Shore Park and Rec, and I'll make sure that happens. But what's interesting is West Shore Park and Rec has been advocating also that we're not engaging them enough from a park and rec standpoint, that they asked, why aren't we sitting at the table? We're part of your park and rec. We pay, you guys are paying significant dollars, $1.4 million. Why aren't we coming to all your committee meetings? Why aren't we being invited? So it's one of those processes where I think we do have to start thinking about West Shore Park and Rec being ours and being engaged, that we start bringing them into the fold of the city of Colwood a lot more often. No, sitting at the table. I'm not coming to the meetings. They're not going to sit at the meetings and not do nothing.
I was just going to mention, if council wants to entertain having another representative at the table, you have to appoint another council member. You have to have a minimum 50% council on the committee.
Any other questions, comments? Are we dealing with this in two parts or one part? Or in
it's two separate, Your Worship.
So for the first one, then Councillor Logan, you have a seconder on that first?
Yeah, it's been moved and seconded, Your Worship.
So call the question on number one. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Then number two recommendation, Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Your Worship. For all the reasons that were stated during the previous discussion, the committee recommended I so move that staff be directed to request that a comprehensive traffic management plan for Rock the Shores 2014 be submitted by the event organizers on or before May 30th, 2014, and that once received, the plan be placed on the next regular meeting agenda for the Protective Services Committee and the Transportation and Public Infrastructure Committee for review and discussion.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. Councillor Lucan spoke to it, but I don't see it reflected in this motion. Perhaps you also need an emergency evacuation plan, at least to know who's in charge.
That's part of the discussions that are happening. It's just they want as part of the traffic plan, that's all part of it.
Okay.
It's all part and parcel.
Anyone else? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, dangerous tree removal, 3250 Machosen Road, Colwood Fire Station. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are a couple of trees that have reached the end of their useful life, unfortunately, up at the fire station, and are going to become a hazard if they're left up for any amount of time. So the fire chief is requesting that authorization be given, and I so move to hire Cedar Grove Tree Service to have both of the dangerous trees removed, and that the wood be sold to a third party to help offset the overall cost to remove the trees.
Seconder?
Second.
Questions, comments? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Careful when your hand's in the air. Councillor Day, in regards to Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee and 2013 annual report. Highlights?
No, there's one.
What's that?
Okay, so the Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee represents all 13 municipalities and 3 school districts. We are required by both federal and provincial legislation to exist. Every community must have a Family Court and Youth Justice Committee, which meets a minimum of 4 times per year, which we have done. I have included the report for your reading pleasure. I do try to keep it somewhat short and sweet. Rather than sending you the minutes of all of our meetings, I send you annually our annual report, which includes both our membership and also reports from each of the subcommittees. Subcommittees include family matters, youth matters, youth mental health, treasurers, also the Capital Region Action Team for Sexually Exploited Youth, who falls under our umbrella for funding. We are funded through the CRD. We have a modest funding of $15,000 per year. We use our funding equally to support projects within the community that we feel are innovative and may promote a new way of facilitating service for the community that otherwise government might not have seen or tried, mostly because it's a very difficult committee to sit on. This is the committee where you hear about all the things that go wrong, and it can be at times very traumatizing to the members who sit on the committee to hear the stories that are factually happening within the community. And in response to that, the committee over the years has chosen to try to put some support behind good news items. The McCreary Centre this year released their third survey report on the circumstances of youth who are in custody in British Columbia. Among their conclusions are that many youth in custody come from difficult backgrounds, have a history of involvement with the police and the justice system, and they've released a report called Time Out 3, a profile of BC youth in custody, and it includes data from a survey of 114 young people between the ages of 12 and 19 who are in custody between August of 2012 and January of 2013. And it's the third time, as I said, that they have surveyed youth in custody. And they basically have reported that there have been a few positive changes. There are fewer youth in custody who have used marijuana. There are fewer who have driven after drinking. But in other areas, there are no differences. We still have a vast overrepresentation of Aboriginal youth and also of youth who have been in government care. Those also with FASD, or fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and with mental health challenges is also a huge area of concern. We have a number of speakers come every meeting. We've heard from the Aboriginal court worker who serves our communities from Port Renfrew to Duncan. And he relies primarily on his contacts within the community and at court to advocate on the behalf of Aboriginal people, youth who may have been criminally charged. We've been hearing from the probation officers at the Ministry of Children and Family Development that sometimes youth are having between 20 and 40 contacts with the law before they are formally charged with an offense. And we've also had a report which was commissioned through the Mary Manning Centre and Pacific Centre Family Services Association 2 years ago, which showed us that there are basically no services for those youth prior to them being charged with a criminal offence. So that was concerning to us. So basically, we are the eyes and ears for your community, giving you the feedback on what the real-life situation is for youth who may be involved with the law. And gang association and affiliation are being related to unstable family life. And there is a new position that's been created that is reporting out on gang idolization and the increasing prevalence of an interest in gangs in Victoria. And we are hosting, and I want to bring to your attention that next month, on May 21st, we'll be hosting Children of the Street Society to come and bring, they're called the TCO Squared workshops, which is taking care of ourselves and taking care of others. They will be presenting at the Victoria City Council chambers, and you're welcome to attend if you'd like to. A very uplifting presentation about a very difficult subject, where youth are employed to do interactive theater and talk about the situations that youth find themselves in and where those choice points are. Now, these are offered throughout our school system. The Family Court Committee brings these presentations over, offers them to the school districts at no charge to any school that would like to have this hosted. And in order to help our government people understand what the situation is, we're offering a presentation, a slightly shorter presentation, at the Family Court Committee regular time from noon until 1:30. And if you'd like to come, you're more than welcome. I think you'll find it entertaining, eye-opening, hopeful, and so the rest is in the report. I just give you a few tidbits to pique your interest, and if there's anything that you feel you would like us to report out on, we would be happy to investigate it for you.
Thank you, Councillor Day. I see that your name's attached to a number of the committees as well as being chair. Thank you. The report is at your hand, D-Work, and well done. Any other comments from Council? No. Motion to receive?
Move to receive. Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. 7.3.5 West Shore Graffiti Outreach Program Annual Report. Is that going, Councillor Logan?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I won't delve into the meat and potatoes of the report, other than to say that 2013 has been an extremely successful year for the graffiti abatement program. We saw a significant decrease in the amount of graffiti, and the graffiti that did occur was remediated in a timely fashion. We also saw some prosecutions and some identifications of known graffiti artists, and we've seen some restorative justice techniques used as well when we're doing some of the remediation of the graffiti on public and private property. The program continues to be supported by generous sponsors such as RONA, and we continue to get a grant from BC Hydro. And it was pointed out that where you see a decrease in Colwood of graffiti, you see an increase in graffiti in other areas of the West Shore that have decided to scale back on their graffiti outreach program. It's also recognized that having the program has been a cost savings as well for Public Works, in that they're not having to go out and spend as much time doing the graffiti abatement. So it's been a success all around. The one thing that we did conclude, though, is that perhaps we don't make the program as available or as well known as we could to not so much our residents who play an important role, but to our developers and other interested parties that may not know that, if their properties get vandalized through graffiti, that there's an avenue for them to report it. And we're certainly eager to take a proactive role in identifying, prosecuting, and trying to minimize any attempts of the graffiti artists to tag their property. So one of the recommendation that came out of the Protective Services Committee, and I so move, is that the communications manager be directed to prepare an official news release regarding the West Shore Graffiti Abatement Program initiatives in Colwood, and that copies of this news release be included as part of the information packages provided to developers and other interested parties at City Hall and on the City website.
Second. Councillor Lukens?
If you haven't had an opportunity to read the report that was brought forward from bylaw with respect to this, I encourage you to. It's probably one of the best reports I've seen bylaw bring forward. And the statistics in there and the numbers that were included are very, very informative, and I would encourage the public to read it. And I really think that's the story that we need to get out. But I've also heard, to expand on Councillor Logan's comments, developers who have been tagged and are fixing it themselves are not aware, and so I've encouraged them to not do that, to contact bylaw, because it helps us be able to identify and mitigate taggers from getting going. So just the awareness piece, and we need to blow our horn a little bit on this one, because we've done a great job as a city, and I know our staff have contributed to that wholeheartedly.
Councillor Day?
Thank you. Certainly have noticed of late, traveling through other parts of Victoria, how many completely defaced areas of the city there are, and what a need there is for graffiti abatement. It really does change the way you feel about a particular part of town that you're in when you look up, and the bus shelter that maybe you're driving by is covered with some rather unsightly graffiti. It doesn't even have to be profane for it to look ugly and uncared for. And it really does, in other areas of the city where they've struggled, as we do, to find the funds to do the beautification, and then, to find that it's, been really denigrated by graffiti. It's hard to see. I keep looking around and thinking, they need a graffiti abatement program, because it makes such a difference in Colwood, and I've seen that it is making a difference. So well done.
Thank you. I had a chance to talk to our CAO, and not with Sandra, but to do on the city website, there may be an opportunity for us to put a reporting link in there. So if somebody does, in part of that setup on there, that if they do see it or whatever, that it's reported and goes straight in for attention, so that make it easy, for folks to engage in things and do it that way. So he will be having that conversation with you to see how that might work in the system. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Call the question on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Moving into Parks, Rec, and Culture.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Due to a possible conflict of interest, I'm going to excuse myself from 8.1 and 8.2.
And
that is, I will also have to declare a potential conflict due to a very odd case in the court system.
Councillors Day and Martin, for the record, both sit at the West Shore Parks and Rec Board, and therefore cannot have discussions at this table. So, with that, who might be taking the lead on these?
I can speak to the memorandum. We received correspondence from the West Shore Parks and Recreation to let us know that they're holding their annual general meeting on June the 12th of 2014, and they would like the city to appoint a representative to hold discussions and vote on their behalf at the annual general meeting. It is recommended that person not be one of the current directors that sits on the board, so it would need to be one of our other members of council.
Also move that the mayor be that person.
And it's not necessarily a conflict, but
because of Arnie,
my other half also sits at that board table, so it would be probably preferential if it were another member of council, if possible.
When is this?
Pardon?
When is it? June 12th?
June the 12th, I
just
believe.
had in my mind you were going to do it.
It was confirmed by West Shore that the regular board meeting scheduled that same night will take place earlier, and the annual general meeting will be at 7 o'clock.
Is that the latest correspondence? Because, to be honest with you, I think I saw something more recently.
Well, View Royal had sent a letter asking them to change the date, and West Shore Parks and Recreation responded saying they've adjusted the time for the regular meeting, with the annual general meeting being at 7. That's the only correspondence I have.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was also a concern last, that same message was conveyed to the administrators last week at our meeting with the executive director at West Shore Parks.
Okay. So it is standing here at, so that'll be the right time, correct?
June 12th at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
Teresa had a question, Your Worship.
Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you, through the chair, to staff. Who's the vice chair of our Parks and Rec committee? Because I think that person would probably be in the best position to represent the interests of the city because they're more familiar with the file.
That would be me. She says as she makes a mad dash for the door. I mean, the conversation earlier was interesting in terms of Whisper's participation at Parks, Rec and Culture, because we tend not to deal with things that are part of that file because they're dealt with at Whispers. I think we have a choice of 4 of us, and I'm assuming whichever one of us ends up going, we're going to get well briefed by... Okay, here's a question through the chair to the CAO. Given their conflict, can the directors brief us on this? I mean, whoever's inevitably, whichever one of the 4 of us goes in is going to have less information than our directors have. And
so were the other municipalities there. Like,
Yeah.
there's going to be people sitting at the table that don't really have a clue what the hell is going on.
Well, I think any one of us would want to walk in with a clue of what's going on.
I know, but
And
I mean,
I-
to the depth
yeah.
that...
Yeah,
Yeah, and
sort of checking on the best way to get briefed on this.
My understanding, though, is that an agenda package for the annual general meeting will be presented. As well, I'm certain that Linda Barnes, the administrator for West Shore Parks and Recreation, would be certainly make herself available to talk to whomever is appointed. I'm not sure if Mayor Hamilton can recall. I think you've served before as the AGM
I have
rep.
gone
I'm
in
not
the
sure what
past.
they provided you with in advance, but we could ask the administrator to work with whomever's been appointed.
yeah, it's, you know, the package is fairly comprehensive. The reports and everything are all in there. They are good about getting their agendas out in advance of the meeting by about a week. So there's plenty of opportunity to review them. And I know that Linda would be very accommodating to handle that.
I am available.
You are available?
I am available.
Recommendation from council then for the appointment of Councillor Cullington.
I'll move that.
Second.
All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carried. Want to grab the other? Oh, no, not yet. One more. Pardon me. Sorry. And then this next one again. Pat, will you take that one? Because I think
will
you had a
try.
hand in putting this together.
So the West Shore Parks and Recreation has submitted a letter to the city discussing 2 things. Their first request was asking the council to do an extension to the operating maintenance and management agreement. They are aware that there's a governance restructure review that's taking place. It's been ongoing for quite some time. It's at a little bit of an impasse, and they're working on that. But the current agreement, the operating maintenance and management, as well as the co-owners and the members' agreements, actually all have expiry dates of June the 30th, 2014. They have been extended over the past 2 years while the governance review took place. West Shore Parks and Recreation is very concerned because there's no business continuity provisions. So if there are no extensions to the agreements, there's no agreements in place to continue operations at any level. So as the co-owners, the cities that own it, including the CRD, or as a West Shore society that's been contracted to run the facilities and provide parks and recreation opportunities in the city. So the first part is they're looking for the city to approve extending the 3 agreements. It has been proposed that the agreements could be extended with a term for 5 years, but very clearly stipulating that the term of those agreements could be much shorter if the governance review is complete, where we could bring new agreements forward and have new terms in those agreements that are agreeable to all the owner municipalities. I don't know if you want to look at both the issues that they have or talk about the agreement first. But the second one's pretty straightforward, and that is the governance committee or the group, the chief administrative officers. They're just looking to find out if there's anything more that council has to say on whatever the issues are creating the impasse with moving forward. Last year, in late 2013, I believe, the city passed a resolution supporting the 13 recommendations as well as one other statement. For the governance recommendations, those were all sent to the West Shore Parks and Recreation Committee, and I'm not aware of any other issues that council has brought up. Their request is if you do have any other issues that you think are creating a barrier to moving forward, they'd like to know what those are so that they could sit down and talk about them.
So there is a recommendation before us.
So the recommendation trying to build in this putting agreements in place in order to allow operations to continue, but making sure council understands that the term that's being recommended is not the set term. All of the member municipalities are agreeing that by saying it can be to no greater than 5 years, we're all open to the idea that when governance issues are settled and new agreements are put into place, that will dictate the term. And again, it'll be no greater than 5 years, but it could be 2 years. We don't know yet. So the recommendation is that council approve an extension of the current West Shore Parks and Recreation Members Agreement, Co-Owners Agreement, and Operating, Maintenance, and Management Agreement for a term no greater than 5 years, which would be June 30th, 2019, or until such time as agreement is reached on an alternate governance structure, and that the Mayor and Chief Administrative Officer be authorized to execute all documentation related to the extension agreements for any period of time up to a maximum of 5 years.
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Comments, questions? Good work on this. It has been a struggle on getting this resolved, but hopefully with everybody somewhat active at this again, we can get it put behind us, resolved and put behind us. It is important for the operating group to have the stability moving forward because it makes it very difficult to plan their budgeting processes and that sort of thing. So I think it's a reasonable request under the circumstances. Anyone call the question? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And now, Councillor Logan, you can grab them. Finance and Admin when Councillor Martin returns.
We really lost them in the back.
Yeah, they've gone to party and back.
And I went out for pizza.
No.
Absolutely not.
It's a secret.
Finance and Admin. Councillor Martin?
Sorry?
Item 8.1.1.
I'm going to defer to our Director of Administration regarding this interesting application.
So the city, at late March, I think, or February, I can't remember, received a municipal notice taxi applications from a gentleman who is applying to the Passenger Transportation Board to have 3 taxis in the 12 Greater Victoria municipalities. He has to apply to, or excuse me, he has to send a notice to all of the municipalities in which he plans to operate. He wants to have 3 taxis that are 7-passenger vans. That's his entire fleet. There was some confusion. If you look at his application, it says the total number of vehicles, it says 247. We have a feeling that he tried to figure out how many taxis there are in the 12 municipalities as opposed to how many he would have himself. So the Passenger Transportation Board has all authorities here. The only opportunity that the council of the municipality has is to make comment. Your comment can be in support. You can make recommendations, such as encouraging that they have vehicles that help people with disabilities, or that they're green vehicles, or you can make comments that are negative if you think we have too many taxis or there's other issues that you're concerned about. But once you make your submission, there's no correspondence that comes back to us. If the comments are negative, they're shared with the applicant, and the applicant has a chance to respond to the Passenger Transportation Board directly, but the process itself will move forward without any more involvement from the city. So we're just recommending that council can either choose to take no action at all, which is your option, or you can send a letter of support to the Passenger Transportation Board for the application by Island Big Cabs for 3 new taxi licenses for 3 vans capable of transporting up to 7 passengers each, and that the letter to the Passenger Transportation Board include a request to encourage the owner of Island Big Cab to provide services to people with disabilities and to use green vans. Leave that to council.
I need somebody to move the recommendation. Or?
Madam Mayor, I would be happy to move resolution number 2.
Second. Comments and discussion? I see a pen in the air, Councillor Martin.
Geez, I thought other people were going to. So just for clarification, is this a West Shore? This is not a West Shore van or taxi service?
My understanding, if I look at the application, he has written at the bottom where his whole jurisdiction would fall, and that he plans to operate in Victoria, Saanich, Oak Bay, Esquimalt, Metchosin, Colwood, Langford, View Royal, Central Saanich, North Saanich, Sydney, and Highlands.
Okay, so my question is, I'm aware, for example, I'm not sure why I know this, but I do. The West Shore, for example, West Shore Cab Company, or whatever they're called, they're allowed to do pickups in the West Shore and go anywhere, but then they have to return back to the West Shore. They're not allowed to, for example, pick up somebody from downtown on the return trip, that they are only allowed to pick up out of the West Shore. And Bluebird cabs, for example, can pick up and drop off anywhere. So that's kind of my question here. My only concern, and I'm not going to support this, but my only concern is that they're going to be coming into the municipality once in a while, dropping people off, grabbing somebody, taking them back out, and that hurts our actual local cab company because they're losing fares because the only fares they can get is the West Shore. So that's the only thing I'm wanting some clarification on is if they're going to be located out here or not, or if they're just going to be located somewhere else and then just coming in once in a while.
Well, if I look at the application that was submitted to us, I'm not quite sure which page it is. The last page at the bottom again, it talks about the transportation of passengers may originate from any points on the Saanich Peninsula, any point on Vancouver Island that is east of Jordan River, including Jordan River, and south of the intersection of Highway 1 and the southern turnoff to Shawnigan Lake. And then below that is where he listed all of these 12 Victoria communities. So I believe it's pick up and drop off, but I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone? And interestingly, recently I received a complaint in that one of our residents here locally had company who had taken a cab downtown to be responsible because they were going for dinner and drinks and that sort of thing. And on their return journey, they had hailed a cab to come out, and they got into the cab, and when the driver was made aware of the destination, he ordered them out of the cab, that he wasn't taking them out to West Shore. in likelihood, I don't know, because they weren't able to identify the cab. I don't know where it is. It's cab number 2.
Yeah.
So cab number 2 is, but I think it's probably one of those jurisdictional things, as you've spoken to, that, they can leave their area, but then they have to come back empty. So it's not, it's too far out and whatever. So I don't know. They do have to apply. They have to get authorization in each of those areas as part of the package. Otherwise, it does restrict them. It's a support. It's an opportunity to ensure safe ways for people to get to and from. So, Councillor Lukens?
Thank you. Just with you saying that, I just wonder if the West Shore taxi cab is the only one in the region that's not able to pick up and drop off anywhere, but everybody else is. I wonder.
They can drop off, they can't pick up.
Yeah, they can drop off anywhere?
You can drop off anywhere.
They can only pick up in West Shore. Yeah, I just wonder why they wouldn't go for an amendment or something. And if we're going to support this one, potentially, to pick up and drop off wherever, we're still creating that problem for them. So I guess it's up to them to pursue it. But I remember an application coming before us maybe a year or two ago, and us having this discussion about taxis and the impact to us and our local businesses.
Councillor Sullivan?
I just think thank you through the chair. I just think it's really important that we keep in mind that we are not approving anything. We are just being asked to make comment to the TPI or TBB or whatever it's called. And I agree, it may be creating the transportation, what's it called, Pat?
The Passenger Transportation Board.
Okay, so the PTB may be creating some inequities, and I think we could encourage West Shore Taxi to actually apply to make some changes there.
And I don't know, as the finance minister said, finance minister, sorry, I just promoted you.
Always wanted to be that.
Application or the cost to upgrade their license might be too expensive. I don't know if that's associated, but that's not for us to worry about. But I think we should make note of it, that we don't want to create inequities in our letter if we're going to support it.
Councillor Cullington?
I'm less worried about creating inequities, because what I see this guy is doing is providing the big passenger vans, which I think is a little bit different than West Shore provides generally. So, and I think it's up to West Shore to run their own business, and they might get a lot of pushback if they tried to expand their license area. So,
anyone else? So we have a motion on Resolution 2 before us. Staff?
I was just going to suggest, if you want to add to your motion, because this notice that you get tells you that you can comment about this application or taxi services in general. So you might want to add a third comment where we just write that we would like to encourage the Passenger Transportation Board to allow the taxi service to pick up in any of the locations authorized under the license.
Pick up and, yeah. Somebody make official that?
I'll move that amendment.
Second.
Call the question on the, okay. Call the question on the addition. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And now back to main motion with the addition to Resolution 2. Any further comments, questions? Councillor Day?
I just wanted to add that I can see in the recommendation that the taxi service that's being proposed here is not accessible, and just that's definitely what I have heard from the Intermunicipal Advisory Committee on Disability Issues, is that there are insufficient numbers of accessible taxi service, so we might add that to our letter.
It's in part of that Resolution 2. That,
it is.
Yeah.
It's the
but we can emphasize the point
yeah.
that it's required, or that it's a needy position. Anybody else? Call the question on main motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Moving into bylaws, bylaw number 1535, first, second, and third readings on our tax rate bylaw number 1535. Before we get on to that, do we have to make any adjustments through any thing on this one? With any decisions or finance changes or anything? Everything's good?
Move introduction.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Second.
Comment, discussion? Councillor Cullington?
Something that I think I've raised every year and never goes anywhere, but I'll raise it again. I think our business rates are high compared to residential. We're trying to encourage business commercial. The reality is we have very little business right now, and I do wonder whether we should be looking at lowering our ratio. I know that has an impact on residential taxes. I know that's unpopular, but we are also, in the process of trying to encourage economic development.
Councillor Sullivan?
Well, thank you. Through the chair, I couldn't agree with Councillor Cullington more. And I think, as we move through the development of our economic development strategy and striking a standing committee on such, that we might be able to, make some changes next year.
Councillor Martin?
What Councillor Sullivan said. In addition, though, I think as we grow out our commercial base, hopefully that will be able to spread out the burden on the commercial, and that we'll hopefully see some decrease that way. But I agree.
But it's a rate, not an absolute amount. So more businesses doesn't automatically decrease the rate.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't automatically decrease the rate,
Yeah.
but it shifts it because what happens is you create more income, right? The more businesses you have, and if your budget doesn't grow to the same exponential rate as your business growth, then you'll actually see a decrease in that rate.
I think Councillor Sullivan's suggestion is a good one, that we don't mess with it this year, but I do think we should be looking at it as part of the budget process next year to have that discussion much earlier in the process, so that I guess it'll be the next council will make that decision.
Councillor Day, and then
Thank you. There was some information in regards to where we're at with the audit process, and I'm just wondering, does that affect where our readings of the bylaw?
No, this is the tax rate bylaw. It does not have anything to do with the audit.
Councillor Lukens, you had any question?
Can't remember what I was going to say.
Call the question. Call the question.
Are you okay then?
For now.
All right. Call the James?
If through the chair I could ask the Director of Finance, what is the actual percentage increase on a normal residential tax bill for the 2014 year compared to 2013?
On an average assessed home, they're going to pay about $73 a year, which is about $6 a month. And on the surface, it appears to be about 5%, but it's actually about 3%.
And Councillor Lukens?
Thank you. Take two. Okay, yeah.
Sorry, may I just jump in? Sorry, to our Director of Finance. I get confused when you tell me it looks like 6, but it's actually 3. How does that work?
It's because we lose about 2% in our assessment value, so we have to make it up first.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Anytime, Councillor Martin. I just wanted to suggest that, and to support Councillor Cullington's ask, and maybe that it be made note of somewhere so it comes forward early enough next year that we have the conversation before we get to this point. Because once again, I think we forget about it and staff forgets about it, and it doesn't get brought forward early enough that we can actually have the conversation in order to change or make a difference to this conversation the following year.
And I think Councillor Sullivan's point is that it will be one of the priority parts within the strategic plan development to look at ways that we can, address that. So there will be reports coming forward. James.
To further that ask, I think what I'm hearing is to combine both the tax bylaw and the actual budget approval through part of the same process. So we're not putting one before the other.
Yep. Councillor Day?
And if I may be so bold as to say, I'm not sure if we're asking the right question, because I think the question that we actually want to answer is, what can we do as a city to encourage business in Colwood and to increase the development of commercial enterprises? We're kind of jumping to the conclusion that what we could do is lower the taxes. That might not be the answer to the question. So I think we're looking at, there may be many things that we can do. I'm hoping some of those things will come out of the Economic Development Task Force. This may be one of the tools in the toolkit.
We have we have second reading before us. Any further questions? Yes, no?
All right. In response to Councillor Day's comments, absolutely, there's going to be a multi-pronged strategy coming from our work on the Economic Development Committee.
Thanks, Councillor Sullivan. So we call the question on second reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Looking for third?
Move third.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Bylaw number 1537, first, second readings only. Colwood Land Use Bylaw 151, 1989 Amendment, R6 Zone, northeast corner of Seafield and Heatherbell.
Move introduction.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Move second.
Second.
Comments, discussion? Councillor Day?
Sorry, I'm just having trouble identifying in my head exactly where this is.
Staff?
Seafield.
Seafield and Heatherbell.
Okay. Thank you.
You okay with that? Any other comments, questions? Was that a yes or?
Oh, no, I was waving.
You're waving? Okay.
Excuse me.
So calling the question on second reading, all those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Day? Opposed? Motion carries.
Motion to move back in camera.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.